My name is Ankur Datta. I'm a senior product manager at Okta. I manage a couple of different products. So one is the Hooks platform. We made an announcement of that, about that yesterday. And besides that, I also look after a few lifecycle management related features such as automations, group rules, access requests, workflow. And today I'm going to talk about how to eliminate tedious tasks with automations and event hooks so that you guys can save time, enjoy longer lunches, etc. And with me, my co-presenter is Nikki. So Nikki is representing one of Okta's partners, Optiv. Partners play a very crucial role in Okta's journey because they help us unblock a number of very critical, very unique use cases. They also have a wealth of knowledge about these security use cases across their different customers. So we learn a lot from them, and that's how we are able to also improve our products. So before I proceed, I just want to make sure you guys are aware of this. So I'm going to talk about the roadmap for a couple of products. So there'll be some forward-looking statements, and I'll be happy to take more questions about the roadmap towards the end. Awesome. So let's get started. So this is actually my second Oktane, and I've learned a lot in the last 1 year after joining Okta. And I learned a lot from my interactions with all of you, all my customers. I heard things such as, hey, Okta is so easy to use, there's a simple user interface, it's trustworthy, and so on. But there was also a set of statements which reoccurred during these conversations. So folks mentioned that, oh, I want more flexibility while I'm using Okta. I want to do a better job of integrating Okta with my other systems. Or in general, I want to stay on top of events occurring in Okta and respond to them quickly. So we came across, certain comments such as people who fear if they're using Okta's security products, so they'll be like, oh, I want to respond to certain security incidents immediately when they occur because I want to prevent, the downstream threat or the risk that might be out there. Or if there are folks who are using Okta's lifecycle management products, so they would like to, stay on top of, maintaining the list of users. So if there are inactive users, they want to disable them immediately so that there are no, issues of past employees getting access to existing apps and so on. And as I mentioned, in general, people wanted to have a better story when they use Okta and integrate with their downstream systems. So keeping these things in mind, for the last 1 year, my team and I, we have been working on a couple of brand new products. And I'm happy to introduce these to you guys today. They are called automations and event hooks. And both have the same objective. They want to make incident response stress-free, less tedious, and more automated. So what are automations and event hooks? So you can think of automations as this very simple point-and-click tool. So from our different conversations, we came to know about these very recurring use cases. So we decided that, okay, let's provide a UI using which one can configure these canned recipes, keep track of events, when those events occur, perform some actions. On the other hand, event hooks is also kind of having the similar objectives, but then it provides the UI and an API, and it's basically Okta's webhooks offering. So when an event occurs, you can register for that event. We send an HTTP post, and then you can use that event information to trigger a number of different downstream workflows. A key difference between both these products is that automations is mainly targeted towards our IT admin folks who prefer not writing code, and they prefer having a very simple point-and-click tool. Whereas event hooks is for our IT admins and their teams who are comfortable writing a little bit of code and doing these last-mile customizations when they use Okta. Now, I'll start talking about automations first, then talk about event hooks, and then we'll also hear a little more from Nikki about how these two products might benefit, the use cases and the different customers she has come across from a wealth of experience. So, talking about automations, so let's take an example from lifecycle management. So as different organizations grow, they come across a lot of different types of users. So there can be employees, contingent workers, interns, etc. There can be external suppliers or partners who are also getting temporary access to your app. And managing the lifecycle of these users can become more painful and complex as the different types of users grow, as the number of apps that the organization is providing, those grow. And in general, like as there are more stakeholders in that whole picture, so things become a lot more complicated. Now at Okta, like we try our best to address a number of these use cases with very simple out-of-the-box tools. We try to make onboarding, offboarding of users simple. We provide easy configuration so that you don't have to write code to manage these use cases. But at the same time, there are certain limitations where there are situations where, let's say, it's tough to extend the existing workflows in Okta, or some of the current workflows were not really designed to address some of these last mile use cases which might be occurring outside Okta, or we might not even provide support for some of those things in the existing out-of-the-box tools. So keeping these things in mind, we came up with the automations framework. So it's a very simple framework. Here's a screenshot of one of the example use cases. So in the left panel, one has to configure all the if conditions. So in this case, let's say I'm checking for user inactivity for 30 days. So if users are inactive for 30 days belonging to a certain group, then check for these users on a recurring basis. And then if all these conditions are true, then one can perform certain actions, like, for example, updating the lifecycle state of the users to something like suspended and so on. So it's a very simple if-then kind of a framework. So when we started working on automations last year, we wanted to prioritize a number of different use cases. So we started working on scenarios which allow our IT admin teams to do a better job in managing the contractor's lifecycle, or sending reminder notifications when, let's say, their employee's password is about to expire. We also started working on a couple of other use cases which facilitate directory cleanup and maintenance, flexible mastering, and security incident response. And in the next few slides, I'll quickly show you guys how some of these use cases can be addressed using this new automations framework. So let's talk about the first use case. So for example, in your organization, you have this short-term project going on. A bunch of contractors or contingent workers are hired, and you want to check their inactivity. So all you have to do in automation is firstly set the Okta group. So we'll check for these conditions only for you belonging to that group. Next thing is you can actually set up a recurring schedule. You can change the time zone depending on when, how, and how you want this automation to run. And finally, you can also customize the user inactivity condition. And in this case, in this example, you're checking it for 30 days. You can change it to 60, 90, and so on. And when these conditions are true, in this example, I'm performing one action where I'm changing the lifecycle state of the user to suspended. I can add more actions such as sending an email to these users that, hey, looks like you have been inactive for X days and you'll get logged out. And the cool thing is you can actually customize these email templates in a very similar fashion how you customize other Okta email templates. On the same lines, there are other use cases we are enabling. So we have another condition that we are supporting where you can check if the user whose password is set up in Okta is going to expire in X number of days. And you can create actually multiple automations. So let's say you want to give a reminder to users that, hey, your password is going to expire in 7 days. So you can have a different email template for that. You can have another automation which checks if the user's password is going to expire in 3 days or 1 day and send them a more stricter warning. And potentially also send an email to other folks in their organization. A few other use cases we were keeping in mind were related to, let's say, partner accounts. So when we onboard partners onto Okta, we have a certain lifecycle state for them. Now, if let's say certain partner accounts are in the pending state for certain days, so instead of doing a manual cleanup and checking for these, using ad hoc scripts and all, you can simply select the lifecycle state of these group of users and say that, okay, if they are pending for 7 days, then perform this action and change the lifecycle state to suspended. And we are also actually going to support more lifecycle states, such as changing the state to deactivated or deleted and so on. One other use case that we came across was related to doing scheduled suspension. So let's say there was this use case where we were working with a nonprofit agency, and they hired a number of volunteers for Hurricane Harvey related support. Now, these users were given access to certain applications for a period of, I think, 180 days or so on. Now, since all the users had the same contract end date, our customer wanted to do like a one-time bulk cleanup. So now with automations, all they have to do is set up the user group for these contractors and set up a different scheduling condition. So instead of doing a recurring check, they can run this automation just once on a particular timestamp. And in this case, let's say the contract end date for all these users is December 31st, 2019, 11:59 p.m. So when that timestamp occurs, then one can perform an action and update the state to suspended for all these users. Now, besides these lifecycle management type use cases, we are also looking at a number of other scenarios across Okta. So very soon we'll run a beta program where you'll also be able to check for one-off events where, let's say, a user reported suspicious activity. Now, when this condition is true, as an IT admin, you can perform a number of different actions, such as notify other admins in your organization, reset the password of this particular user, expire the session, suspend all devices, and so on. So in terms of the roadmap, so we made the first few use cases of automations available in EA a couple of months ago. Some of you are actually using it, and we have got like a lot of really good feedback. So as of today, you can suspend users based on inactivity. You can remind users based on their expiring passwords, and you can perform actions such as notifying them or updating their lifecycle state. But then we just got started, so we are enabling other use cases. So in a few months, sometime in Q2, you'll also be able to clean up stale registrations, deactivate, reactivate users based on custom attributes. This is actually very useful for users who use our import flow products. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, that we'll also run a beta program where you can detect suspicious activity and perform downstream actions. Apart from this, we are also trying to figure out how we can, empower you guys with more actions in the automations framework. So we're looking at things like when conditions are true, also make a group membership change. So you can add the user to a new group, remove them, or just change their membership altogether. You can update user attributes, and that's another thing we're looking at. And with the recent acquisition of Azuka, we are trying to explore that, how we can actually leverage their set of connectors and provide support for more third-party actions, and in general, like make the whole framework a lot more powerful. Since we announced hooks yesterday, we are also trying to look at use cases where you can also execute certain inline hooks when certain conditions are true, or when an automation runs, you can keep track of that event, and then also you subscribe to that event and then perform downstream actions. Great. And as I mentioned, that we are also looking at use cases besides lifecycle management. So when we ran the beta program for automations last year, we got some really, really good feedback. So these are like some of the things we are actively exploring. You'll hear more announcements from us in the next few months. But I just wanted to quickly highlight some of these use cases because I know they'll resonate with some of you in the audience. So one classic use case was that you wanted to check, some of our customers wanted to check that are there a group of users who are making a number of unsuccessful login attempts? And they wanted to set a threshold that if these number of attempts cross, let's say, 5 in the last 24 hours, then they wanted to take some actions such as reset their Okta password, email the user, inform the admin, so on. There was another variant of the scheduled suspension use case where customers had the scenario where they had a constant stream of different groups of contingent workers joining over the course of different days. So instead of setting a single contract end date for all these users, they wanted to set different contract end dates for them. So we want to support this use case by checking for the number of users whose contact end date is today, and if that is true, then bulk suspend them. We are also looking at other use cases such as cleaning up users who have been in an unverified state for an X number of days. A lot of admin productivity use cases where, let's say if you have a pending task in Okta for X number of days and no one is picking that up, so you can configure an automation and remind the other admins to help with that pending task. Or other use cases where we are trying to cut down on the number of end user support tickets. So for example, certain users were imported, one of their attributes was not properly filled up, or let's say even after the user got onboarded, they for some reason did not set up their MFA. So you can check for these empty attributes and then send a reminder to users, or actually make that change by yourself using the automations framework. So you can start using automations today. As I mentioned, the two use cases on disabling inactive users and reminding users about expiring passwords, they're already available in EA. And it's pretty easy to actually enable these features. You won't have to contact someone in support, etc. You simply need to go to our early access features manager. You can access it by going to the settings menu item, click on features, and you'll see a list of features which are available in early access. And just enable the checkbox next to automations and you're all set. Cool. So the next thing I want to talk about are event hooks. So as a reminder, automations is targeted towards folks who are interested in not writing code and prefer using a point and click tool, whereas event hooks are for our other users who are comfortable writing a little bit of code, and they have a number of other use cases where they want to do a lot more customization, they need a lot more flexibility. So let's see what event hooks are. So the main idea is that when an event occurs in Okta, a system log event, so we'll push that event to your external service, and you can write a little bit of custom code and then perform downstream actions. So a good example would be, let's say, I'm an IT admin at Okta, for example, and I have a new user join this group called Okta Executives. When I add this user to this new group, Okta publishes an event called user added to this particular group. And we have all the information that, what's the user's ID, their group name, etc. Now, I can subscribe to this event. I can use the event hooks API and the underlying service to send this event to my system. And when I receive this event, I can then create these custom integrations where I can automatically add this user to a private Slack channel of all the Okta executives. And because it's just a one-time setup, so in the future, as more and more users get added to this group called Okta executives, you won't have to again manually add them to this private Slack channel. This will be automated. So we're looking at a number of other similar use cases where, again, the main idea is that you register for the event, we send an HTTP post, you write some custom code. So for instance, if a user is removed from a particular group membership, you can do this custom integration to send an email to the group admin. If an import job failed, Okta is publishing an event, you can use that information to create a ServiceNow ticket. If a brand new user registers into your new portal, you can create a Mailchimp marketing campaign, for instance. Or if you're using Okta's mobility management products, and if you come across this event where a user's device certificate got revoked, you can add this device information to your list of blacklisted devices. And these were just some examples. We'll go to EA with event hooks sometime later in April, around the third week. And in the first iteration, we are going to whitelist the following events across these different categories. So you should be able to track these different user lifecycle events, such as user got created, activated, deactivated, deleted, various user auth events, has a new user logged in, has the user's password been reset or updated, a number of app events, was the user assigned to a particular app, removed from that app, was their app password changed. I talked about a couple of group membership events already, and we're also looking at a number of other events across Okta too. So for instance, if you're an admin and you want to know that is someone updating your password policy, So Okta is going to publish the policy updated event, and you can track that event and then notify your channel, private Slack channel of other admins and inform them that, hey, someone made this change. Is that okay or not? Cool. I want to talk a little bit about how event hooks work. As I mentioned, it's Okta's webhooks offering. So we are following now a number of very standard best practices that most webhooks product in the industry follow. So we are delivering these events using HTTP. We are doing a push instead of pull. So in the past, you might be using Okta's system log APIs to constantly poll for events and then perform actions, but you won't have to do this polling anymore. So we'll just push the event to you, and you should be all set. We're also doing a best effort delivery, which means that we're not going to send these events in a particular strict order right now. So when this event occurs, we'll make our best attempt to send it to your external service. And we're also putting extra emphasis on making sure that these events are delivered in a secure manner. So a little bit about the security aspect. So there are 3 things we're trying to keep in mind to ensure our event hooks are delivered in a secure manner. So number one thing is that when one configures a new event hook, we want to make sure that you verify that you own the endpoint at config time. So the benefit of this is that we want to prevent scenarios where someone else who has access to this or who has knowledge of this endpoint tries to DDoS you and just makes this flood of unnecessary post requests. So this approach of verification is actually available. Is going to be available when we go to EA with event hooks in a few weeks. We're also trying to ensure security from 2 other standpoints. So one is that post EA, we'll also try to make sure that Okta signs these requests when they send it to you, so that you can actually trust and ensure that, okay, it's actually Okta who's sending this event to me, not some other service. And the other thing we also want to do is on the health checking front, where over a period of time, we want to make sure that the consumer of the same endpoint is actually still the same consumer. And if something changes, we'll come up with this set of functionality where you can get notified and you can then do adequate maintenance of these endpoints. So again, like event hooks is also very easy to enable when it goes to EA on April 17th. No need to contact Okta support or anything. You just go to settings, features, you'll see the list of available features in our feature access manager, and just enable the checkbox next to event hooks. Great. So that was pretty much what I had to cover about event hooks. I'll be happy to go through more questions during the Q&A part towards the end. And I have a couple of other announcements, but before that, I want to hand it over to Nikki so that she can talk about the use cases that she has come across while talking to her customers and how the automations and event hooks might benefit those customers. Over to you, Nikki.
Hey, you're still awake. It's after lunch. I'm impressed.
I actually forgot to mention one more thing. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're also going to launch an event hooks UI sometime in the May-June timeframe. It's pretty much going to mimic the API, and you'll be able to see a list of existing event hooks, activate, deactivate them, so on. Now over to you.
Thanks. Okay. Where are we here? I don't want to get too far ahead of you. Right, yeah? Are you done with that one?
I'll cover it towards
cover it later?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, I am from Optiv. Here's a nice little blurb from our website about who we are, but we handle all kinds of security, right? The breaches, the firewalls, the this and the that. My job is to implement Okta. I go around to customers who buy Okta and want help implementing it, or they own it and they want help leveraging and utilizing their investment. So that's what I do, and it's kind of fun. I have lots of different customers and lots of different verticals, and I don't tell my customers, but there's an easy button with Okta. And I'm here to show you some of the use cases that these additional developments will help you as admins and you as your companies leverage Okta a little bit better. So one of our use cases, I've got an energy company in Southern California. They use JIT to create accounts in Okta from AD. They don't want to use full sync. They've got a licensing issue. They're just not comfortable with it. They just want to create a user in Okta if a user needs Okta. So today, they either have to manually go in and clean up those users that have left the organization or are not in sync OUs or whatever, or they just don't clean it up. And then maybe we have a licensing problem, maybe we have an accountability problem. So what we can do with this, and I've actually put it in beta in an environment, we're just going to start disabling inactive users, right? If you haven't logged in X number of days, just like the AD policies, we're going to do it in Okta. We're just going to disable it. That's going to get us compliance. It's going to free up our guys to do better things, and it's going to reduce our license costs in that environment. And I think it's going to be a really nice value add for them because the manual stuff just, quite frankly, isn't very fun. It's not easy. So password reset notification. So I have a customer that has AD and Okta mastered accounts. And in AD, I mean, that whole password expiration thing, you can solve it in a number of ways. You can buy a tool, you can write a PowerShell script, you can do all kinds of things. It's not part of AD unless you are on the network and can Control-Alt-Delete, but Okta hasn't really had a good way to do this. So this lets us set up an automation to notify our Okta mastered accounts, our accounts that don't need AD. I think some folks have talked about that earlier. If you don't need to be in AD, just put your account in Okta. So this allows us to send them reset notifications, not only for the Okta mastered accounts, but for those folks like me who hardly ever connect to the network. And then they can reset their password prior to it expiring because it always expires when I'm trying to do something for a client. Every single time. So this will let me know a little bit sooner. My password's expiring. It will help those Okta mastered, those third party, those folks that aren't on the network know that it's happening. It improves our customer satisfaction, and honestly, and I'm guilty, I am guilty, I've called the service desk because I can't get my password reset. So this is going to help us leverage that tool in Okta to self-service password reset. Okay, user onboarding. This is an organization in the automotive industry. I think event hooks would help them a lot. They have a significant investment in ServiceNow, and their old onboarding process, the form was, I kid you not, this long, and everything you could possibly ever want, and as a manager, you had to know. You had to know what system you wanted, and you could tell that this form was written by IT people. It was hard, and every user onboarding was at least 7 tickets, right? So what this is going to allow the organization to do is just notify ServiceNow that we have a new hire. And then leveraging that orchestration in ServiceNow, now they can open up a ticket for a badge. They can open up a ticket for a PC. They can know because this particular organization is using Workday as a master, right? So the data is going from Workday to Okta, and then it goes into ServiceNow. They can know this person's role. Do they need a computer? Let's get it for them. Do they need access to the H drive, the Q drive, the whatever? Let's get it for them. So when the employee shows up, and inevitably the employee shows up the same day HR puts them in the system, not necessarily 2 weeks ahead, we can get we can get them the tools they need, we can get them their provisioning a lot quicker, and then we can reduce our cost to our service desk by eliminating all of those calls for I can't get into this, I didn't get that piece of software, and the user's just going to be happier. I mean, your new employee is just going to be happier. So I think that one is going to fit in really, really well. Okay, this one's personal. I was an Okta admin for a really long time, and I do hear this from a lot of my customers. What's with the task? What's with the dashboard? Why do I have to log in to find out that so-and-so didn't create, or that O365 had a licensing problem with Freddie or Susie or whoever? I don't want to log in, right? There's no accountability, which, okay, that might not be all that bad, but then I have no way to show how much effort an IT admin is expending in Okta trying to fix these things that don't get ticketed. So with event hooks, what we will have the availability to do is then, if an import fails, if there's somebody sitting on the import screen needing attention, right? We don't know if we have 5 Mike Joneses in the company. There's a Mike Jones sitting there going partial match. Unless you log in, you can't see it. This automation will allow us to open up a ticket and notify someone to go look at it. O365 licensing errors, if you think about it, if we do it right? So someone's in the E3 group and the E1 group, and Microsoft's not going to let that happen. They just come back and say, no. But if we do it right, we can use the automation to notify the right people the first time and say, look, you got a guy in 2 groups, or fix it based on their role. Somebody manually tried to do something that didn't quite go, so let's get the ticket to the right person. Let's send an email. Let's get it so we don't have to log into the console and then call the right person to fix the problem. So that's going to help us quantify our effort to care and feed our Okta environment. It's going to reduce our service desk calls because we're going to be able to fix these problems before the users identify them. And it's going to free up our resources to do really cool things like make more event hooks. And I think that was all I had.
Cool.
Ooh, thank you.
Careful. Thank you, Nikki. That was super helpful, Nikki. It was very insightful too. So a couple of things before we go into the Q&A. So we are continuing to make more improvements to our existing features. I didn't get a chance to mention in the previous slide. So for instance, for event hooks, we plan to add more support for allowing filtering of events, so that instead of receiving events for so let's say you subscribe to the event user assigned to an app, and instead of receiving this event for all possible apps, you can add a filter and say that only notify me for a particular app. We're also trying to add more context to the event payloads, or provide facility to transform these payloads so that it's a lot more easier to integrate with downstream systems. Couple of more things about these new features that we talked about just now. So automations is going to be available if you're already using Okta's lifecycle management product. Event hooks will be available in the core SKU. So if you're using an Okta product which generates those events, you should be able to register for them and continue receiving the HTTP posts and get notified about these. Once again, a reminder about how to enable these features. Go to the early access feature manager and then enable the checkbox next to these features. I wanted to give a big shout out to some of my team members who are actually in the audience right now, engineers, designers, marketers who spend hours and hours, making sure that we are able to stay on track and make these features available. And in order to keep us busy, so please provide us more feedback on how we can improve these features. You can also go to our Okta Ideas board in Okta's Help Center. The link is over there. It's bit.ly/Okta Ideas. And you can post new ideas, upvote existing ideas, and we check that board very regularly. So we'll make sure that the topmost voted ideas are actually on our roadmap and so on. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to support@okta.com, and we'll be happy to set up a quick chat with you and understand your use cases a lot better. After the session is over, please rate the session, give us feedback on what else you'd like to know about these new features in future customer meetings or at future Oktanes. And finally, I just want to also remind you guys that in the same room at 3:30, there'll be another interesting session on from Okta's IT team on some best practices on how they use HR systems and IT. They'll also talk a little bit about some of the automation and event hook related use cases, so please make sure to attend that event. And finally, let's go through questions. Yeah, so there was some snafu, like the things were out of sequence. So yeah, I was mainly talking about some of the upcoming enhancements we are working on for event hooks, like filtering, transformation of events, and adding more context to the event payload. So yeah.
There's a question here.
Oh, we have a question from that side.
Are all these features going to be controllable through the API as far as creating the event hook or creating an automation? We'll be able to do that through the API and not just through a UI? I think maybe you answered that right at the end of the first part of what you were saying, but I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, so automations is a UI-only product, whereas for event hooks, so when we launch it on April 17th, you'll have the API, but in a couple of months, we'll also provide a UI to mimic the API. So the same operations on creating a new event hook, verifying the endpoint, viewing the list of existing event hooks, that should all be possible both using the API and the UI.
Yeah, hi. I had a question here.
Yeah, the lights are actually too blinding.
That's fine. So the question that I had was in one of the features where you mentioned that the workflow can suspend accounts.
Right, right.
So my question is that equally applicable to Okta mastered as well as AD mastered accounts?
Okay, so today in the existing iteration of automations, we are only looking at users who are set up in Okta, whose lifecycle state is in Okta for the inactivity-based suspension. I'm discussing this use case with a fellow PM who also looks after the Okta and AD integration, and we're trying to figure out that is there a way for us to also check the state in AD and or like perform downstream actions back in AD.
But it will do an AD mastered user.
Yeah, so the use case is basically a lot of our users are AD mastered.
Right, right.
And there are a bunch of accounts that come from AD which they haven't logged in for say 90 days or even more.
Right.
So ideally what we would like to do is put them in a suspended state because they haven't logged in for an extended period of time.
Okay.
And then when they log in, then make it active again. That would be the ideal use case for us.
See. So in that case, like if their user session is being created in Okta, then we should be able to capture, whether they are actually logging in through Okta, what was their last login date, were they updated in Okta or not. And then based on that, we can check the inactivity. But then we'll be making the lifecycle state update only in Okta right now. Yeah.
One question. Thanks, Ankur, for the info here. So, over here.
Oh, okay.
Anyhow, so event hooks looks great. Two-part question.
Cool.
One is there going to be a limitation on the number of hooks that we can deploy? 10 per instance, 20, 100, that you're going to recommend? That's one part. The second part is Okta also has this Okta provisioning agent, right, which is basically driven or triggered based off of events that you can send. And then, of course, it's a SCIM-based interface, but still there is, right, an extension capability which is there. So between OPA and this, which one, is there how do you compare, and is there a recommendation around it or a roadmap to say one is going to be deprecated versus other, or both will be supported, and in which use cases what will happen?
Oh, I see. Okay. So let me answer the first question. So yes, in the beginning, we'll have some limit for number of event hooks you can configure per org, and we'll keep a close eye on how often are people hitting that limit. And then in the future, when things look a lot more stable, we'll make an effort to actually increase that limit too. I believe today the limit is 10 event hooks per org and 10 event hook configurations per org. And for each event hook, you can add a large number of different events, or you can have like single events. So regarding your second question, so the objective of event hooks is not to replace existing Okta products at all. So if you're already using Okta's provisioning products, and I hope I've understood your question correctly, otherwise we can chat in more detail offline. But the goal is not to replace existing products. It's just that if you're using an existing product and certain events are already being generated, you can use that for more, custom workflow integrations.
Quick question regarding the event hooks. You cited an example of event hooks for notifying when there are issues, say, when you have an import failure of some sort. Are there any plans to leverage event hooks such that they could send a notification through, say, Okta's Slack application into an organization's Slack channel as opposed to the current method, which is tied specifically to a user's email address
Got it.
and goes into a user's inbox, which is promptly then filtered away and never to be seen again.
I see. So to be honest, like there are no immediate plans to support these other notification channels, but then with this recent Azuqua integration, because one can actually enable a Slack connector using that tool. So we are looking at all these scenarios where how you can more easily keep track of that event. And if you already have your own Slack configuration in place, you can use Azuqua to configure that Slack send message action and receive notifications. But if you notice a repetitive pattern, then we'll consider providing it more natively out of the box in Okta product itself. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, hello. My first question is about automations.
Okay.
So you mentioned that automations could be triggered run once, or it could be in a scheduled manner.
Yeah.
So could there be an option to have it real time?
Would there be an option to run it real time?
Yes. So for example,
okay.
if somebody gets added to a group, I want to notify immediately to an email address or something else.
Okay. Yeah. So, in one of the last examples that I mentioned, where one can track an event such as user's account is compromised and then perform actions. So for that use case, we've actually made an effort to support these near real-time automations. So when that event occurs, then we immediately perform those actions. The first use case we are enabling is for that account compromised event. But then again, like we are looking for feedback from you guys, and if you notice that you're interested in configuring real-time automations for other Okta events, we'll definitely work on enabling those too.
Okay, and the second question was about the event hooks. You mentioned that there would be a post to an custom HTTP server that we provide. For the event hooks,
Yeah.
we have to provide a custom HTTP host,
Yeah.
where you will do a HTTP post,
Yeah.
and there could be verification, and in the GA there could be signed secrets.
Yes.
So is that going to be incorporated in SDK, or is it something we need to build custom?
Okay, so we are also working with our developer experience team to come up with hooks as a SDK. So using that SDK, you'll be able to configure both inline hooks, event hooks. So that's definitely in the horizon. But for the time being, like at least like when we go to EA on April 17, that time we won't have that SDK available. I have a question on that side. I don't know. Okay, let's take that one.
Yeah, we just have time for one more question, so we'll just take this one.
Yeah, we can always chat outside the room after this event. I'll be happy to take more questions there too.
Thank you. So I was curious about capturing events that are not necessarily considered failures by Okta. We have certain instances where a user will be captured in a continuous single sign-on state.
Sorry, can you keep the mic closer? I can't hear it clearly.
So we have users that can occasionally be captured in a continuous single sign-on state where it will just keep redirecting them back to Okta. Would that be something that we can capture with the hooks or automations?
Sorry, can you repeat what kind of event you're talking about?
When the user goes to sign on to an application,
Right.
instead of being directed to the application will send them back to Okta for single sign-on and be stuck in an infinite loop. I was wondering if we would be able to capture something like that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So when I went through the list of events that we'll support, we are also going to whitelist the user login, user session started, session ended events too. So once you subscribe to that event, you'll be able to create these custom workflows.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
That's it.
That's it? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for attending. I'll be able to, I can take more questions outside the room, and you can also get in touch with us through the Okta Ideas book. Thanks.